Good morning, everyone. Come on in, get your refreshments, and please have a seat. Welcome to Prime Time at BU Library. These Prime Time presentations are to celebrate the experiences and accomplishments of Bethel faculty, students, and staff. This is a collaborative project between the Friends of BU Library, faculty development, and other offices on campus. If you enjoy the primetime programming, please consider becoming a member of the Friends. Ask at the Research Assistant's desk for more information. And archived recordings of most of our primetime presentations are in the BU Digital Library that's on the library's website. Coming up next week, I hope you'll come back on Tuesday, December 5th, 11:15. Our Faculty Excellence Award winner for service, Sam Mulberry, will be interviewed by his friend and colleague Chris Moore for a live podcast of their autobiography series. That sounds fun. That will be enjoyable. Today we're going to welcome Edgren scholars, Dr. Harley Schreck, and Junior Sociocultural and Reconciliation Studies major Rita Mecicar, as they share what's been learned over the 19-year history of the Bethel-Frogtown-Summit University Partnership, including the challenges and promises of building university-community relationships from both the community and the university perspectives. Thank you for being here.
Well, thank you very much. Thank you. I'd like to thank you for coming to hear our presentation. It's good to see you all here. And before I start, we'd like to thank Bethel University for supporting the research through the Edgren Scholarship Program. It's just a great chance to, for me as a faculty member, to work with the student and to do research together. It's a wonderful program. Over the past 3 decades, there's been a substantial amount of interest in the formation of university-community partnerships across the nation. The reasons behind this have varied, but include the creation of realistic student learning opportunities, finding ways to serve communities beyond the walls of the university, justifying the resources dedicated to supporting universities, and providing venues for research and practice. Significant but often overlooked reason for universities, I think this applies to Bethel in particular, to partner with communities is to profit from the richness and depth of experiences and expertise that are found within communities. The latter was an important reason why Bethel University was drawn to partner with the Frogtown-Summit University neighborhoods in 1998. Over the past 19 years, the Bethel University Frogtown-Summit University Partnership, which I'll just call the partnership from now on, has built upon a relationship that's involved scores of service learning classes, community engagement opportunities, contributions to Bethel University classrooms and events on campus, and countless other forms of working together. Some examples are tutoring at the Hub Center, and Ruth is right there. Ruth Rodriguez is here, and so I think the first time Bethel worked with at Hub was in 1998. I think we found out. Looking at some of the records, so a long time. Literacy leaders at Maxfield Elementary School. Tax preparation with low-income seniors, Leo Gabriel's class. Community health workers at Camp United Methodist Church through the nursing program. And then volunteering with things like Frogtown Days, Urban Farm and Garden Alliance, and the Jazz Festival, all of which take place in the neighborhood. Scores of other programs and various types of outreach have taken place over the 19 years. Today, we're presenting on a research project that attempted to understand how the partnership is accomplished, what it has accomplished, and how it has affected the neighborhoods in Bethel University. Most importantly, the research has focused on the dynamics of the partnership and how it developed over time. And the partnership This partnership is unique within, if we look at all the partnerships that have existed over time in terms of its longevity. I don't know of any that have lasted this long in the United States. And it's unique in terms of its scope and the amount of work that's been done. As you can see here, just in 2016, 2017, there were almost 6,400 hours of student volunteer work in the neighborhood. There are 404 service learning students that were involved in the neighborhood. And a large number of students who are also involved in community events, and that's not represented here. So it's pretty substantial in size. As we carried out the research, we focused on 3 questions. One, has Bethel University been a good partner? And we'll talk about what that means in a little bit. 2, has Bethel helped build social capital in the neighborhood? And social capital is defined as interaction, relationships, informed by trust. Okay, and so has Bethel helped build social capital in the neighborhood, and has a partnership enhanced and supported student learning. Those are the 3 things that we focused on in the project so far. Now for the most exciting part of any presentation, the literature review. So, because we're very kind, we left out all the citations. And we reduced the literature review to quite a bit. If we look at the literature that deals with university-community partnerships, we can see that a substantial amount of interest can be traced back to 1990, when I believe Ernest Boyer challenged academicians to expand their view of scholarship to include more engagement with communities and real-life challenges. Get off the university, get involved, is essentially what he said. In 1996, the interest was furthered when Henry Cisneros, the Secretary for Housing, announced that funding was available to support the creation of partnerships. Since that time, there's been a substantial number of studies exploring various issues related to partnerships. Many of the studies have attempted to discern the factors that need to be considered if partnerships are supposed to be successful, and they generally are focused on 3 areas. The first one is how do you manage the cultural and systemic differences between universities and communities? They're very different entities. Okay. Second is the need for mutuality. Baron, is that a word, mutuality? You should know. Okay. Mutuality, the need for mutuality in the partnership. And third is the need for long-term commitment on both the university and the university's part if things are to be successful. Well, the present research explores what's been missing for most of these studies actually, and this has been a real critique of the literature, is listening to the community. Almost all the studies have looked at partnerships from the perspective of student learning and the university, but listening to the community, the effects of the community has been a real gap in the literature. So the present research explores the dynamics of partnership from both perspectives of the university and community. However, today's presentation is going to focus almost solely on the community. So how do we do the research? Okay. The research uses qualitative methods to explore the perceptions and experiences of community members that have been involved in the partnership. Now this is important. After obtaining IRB approval from the Bethel Human Subjects Committee, better hear that right, the research progressed through 2 phases of research, and then a 3rd phase will take place, is actually started now, and Dr. Okochi's class is helping out with that, and will take place in the spring. We'll just talk about the first 2 phases. In the first phase, students from the spring 2017 qualitative research methods class worked with documents and conducted interviews with key informants who were familiar with the origin and development of the partnership to build a chronology for the partnership. See the poster there, and Rita will talk about that a little bit more. From this work, they were able to distill key insights that led to the next phase of the research. The second phase of the research started this June and involved Rita Mecicar, Sandy McNeil, who used to teach in Bethel, and now is a Frogtown resident, and Melvin Giles, who's a Frogtown resident. And myself, we worked together to explore community perspectives and experiences in the partnership. Long ethnographic interviews were conducted with 19 informants. These are recorded and transcribed. We don't have carpal tunnel, which is amazing, but they're transcribed, okay. Rita and myself coded the interviews and then compared the results of the codes. The coded interviews were then analyzed and research reports were written by the two of us. The four-person team then met and discussed the analysis, which led to a revision of the research report. So now we'll turn to the origins and development of the partnership, and Rita will take over.
Hi everyone, thank you again for coming and hearing us speak. I'm going to be talking about the history of the partnership, which we gathered all that data in the first phase. This was a poster that was put together by two graphic design majors from Bethel last semester. And we really just put this up to test your eyesight, and I hope you can see this. No, but if you really want to see this more in depth, there's the poster right there, so feel free afterwards to go and look at it. The big dots or bullets are the main phases that we saw in the timeline of the history. So I'll just be talking about that and the main events that took place in those phases. The first phase we called the pre-partnership, and during this time, community members and Bethel faculty and administration looked around and walked around the neighborhood. They wanted to ask the question of what possible collaborations could they have. At the end of this time, it was around 1997, that Salvation Army asked Bethel to consider this partnership. The second phase we called the formation of the partnership, which was from 1997 to 2001. The first partnership coordinator was hired at this time. PAC had their first monthly meeting, which is a partnership advisory committee that meets every third Tuesday of the month. The mission statement for the partnership was written. Administrator at Bethel, Vincent Peters, entered a new role. He became the overseer of the partnership. And during this time as well, a lot of other service learning was incorporated into more courses. And the King CDC was open, which is the Child Development Center in the Frogtown area. The third phase we called maturity, and it had two sub-phases. The first one was the program implementation and reassessment of goals. Questions and concerns arose about the reciprocity of the service learning and who was really benefiting from that. Also questions about the development of relationships between students, faculty, administration, and community members arose. And these were all discussed during a spring retreat in the March of 2001. A lot of other things started to take place during this time. The Weed and Seed program began, Saturday science programs began as well, and the tithing of enrollment spots for Frogtown residents were offered. On the education portion of the third phase, we called it this because at this time a lot of educational opportunities were implemented. Beginning development of the urban house began, which is where Bethel students can go in the Frogtown community and live there. They can do research, work there, and really interact with the community members there by living in the community. The Maxfield Elementary Literacy Development Programs began. Classes in Frogtown and Summit University began. Scholarships for two community members were given out at this time as well. And the goal was really to establish beneficial educational opportunities for Bethel and community members, as well as to address issues of race and culture still present at Bethel. The fourth phase we called assessment and establishment of roles, because questions about the roles of the partnership were asked and discussed during PAC meetings, and a need was acknowledged about developing communication between Bethel and community through PAC. And lastly, the fourth phase was the growth of network from 2010 to 2012. During this time, the nursing program joined the partnership in doing service learning. The first cohort graduated. Development for more service learning options were discussed, such as the anthropology and social work departments started taking Z courses in the community. So I just want to look at some of the main themes that we found in the history. The first was partnerships are constantly changing, so that there becomes a need for reevaluation and reassessment of how the partnership is doing, what it's doing, and if it's doing it well. This reassessment was seen throughout the phases as people asked questions that helped develop the partnership further. Another theme we saw was the importance of trust between the partners. As the partnership developed and the amount of people and organizations that were engaging with the partnership grew, the challenge for building trust had to be addressed. The partners wanted to see benefits for both sides in that engagement. And lastly, the challenge of communication is seen as well due to a lot of factors, but one of which is the difference in the culture of both groups. Bethel is one institution, and it tries to be organized and seeks to really benefit the students and families that are connected to it. The community, on the other hand, has many different businesses and organizations, and each of those have their own set of goals for themselves and the community. So communication needs to happen where both groups feel like the other understands its goals.
Thank you, Rita. Okay. I brought this coffee cup, just in case I need coffee, but also to show off my granddaughter. Okay. We'll turn now to community perceptions and what we found from the summer's research. When we look at, we really had a really rich time of talking with community members and residents, and benefited greatly from their insights and their input. One of the things we looked at are the perceptions of Bethel University. How does the community perceive Bethel? And there's a lot of dynamics of that. We can start with the power of place. As Rita alluded to, Bethel's an institution. Bethel University is one institution. Frogtown-Summit University are neighborhoods. Frogtown-Summit University, although very different from one another, are both central city urban neighborhoods with fairly high levels of ethnic diversity. Bethel University is located in the St. Paul suburb of Arden Hills. That's where you are. And compared to the two neighbors, is much less diverse. So that alone is a difference that is important. When we ask people, when we talk to people about Bethel, in a phrase, Bethel is described by many persons we interviewed as a rich, white suburban school. That's the perception in the neighborhoods. And along with this description come a number of stereotypes. Bethel was seen by some as conservative, unaware of urban challenges, unconcerned with social problems and social justice. Now, as all stereotypes, some of those, there's some basis to them, but there's also perhaps some nuances and some truths that are also at play. But the stereotypes are there, and they came up in the interviews. So it creates a challenge for Bethel and for community residents who partner with Bethel University. As one person reported, she was in a meeting with people who were working against sex trafficking. And quote, she said, "I'm going to be honest, at this human trafficking task meeting, when I said I'm working with Bethel University, there was a lot of folks who said, you have to be kidding me. Why would you do that? No, they don't get this. Bethel doesn't get this." So there's that perception sometimes that affects Bethel's work in the neighborhoods. One area that is a real concern, of course, at Bethel is the area of diversity. And over the past decades, Bethel University has attempted to attract more diverse students and staff and to become a place that is more welcoming and supportive for students of color. I've been here 30 years. There's been quite a bit of progress over that time period. But we know that this effort has seen its ups and downs. Many in the community that we talked with argued that the community can be a partner in helping Bethel deal with this and become more effective, and helping Bethel students learn by helping Bethel students learn and thrive in diverse communities. As one person said, quote, "The institution is enriched by having diverse perspectives. As we are having global change and folks are coming from different parts of the world to the United States, the browning of the United States, the Frogtown community recipients are bringing that rich resource to the table," unquote. So there was an argument that the neighborhoods could partner with Bethel to help Bethel with its attempt to become more diverse and to do well with diversity. Indeed, a number of our informants describe their roles as guides to help students, and by extension, Bethel University advance in its understanding and acceptance of diversity. One person said, quote, "I tell people that bigotry and racism is taught at the dinner table. It takes time to get to know people, and it takes willingness to get to know people. You deal with individuals. You can't deal with the whole community. You can't deal with the whole culture. You get to know individuals, and you no longer paint with a broad brush. That's my advice. Get the smallest brush you can, and paint slow, and get to know people." It's clear that this person and a number of other persons that we met see themselves as co-educators when they work with students and take that role real seriously, and actually provide pretty good guidance. So when we talked with community members about their perceptions of Bethel, we found they it is important to distinguish between students, faculty, Bethel University as an institution. Students were seen as inexperienced, but generally eager to learn. We asked one person, what kind of feedback did you get from the community when students were sent out door to door to campus and neighborhood over some issue? And he said, well, some good and some comical, no disrespect, but you can tell Bethel students are not from Frogtown. You hear the community like, oh, the Bethel kids are out tonight. But he said they never backed down. The Bethel students, every year, kept coming back. We laughed that they weren't really city kids, and they certainly weren't city kids from that neighborhood. But, excuse me, they were as good as their word. They're tough, they're committed, they did what they said they're going to do, and not necessarily in good circumstances. So a pretty good endorsement. This is from someone who knew what he was talking about. The faculty, this is embarrassing, got mixed reviews. Okay. Some were highly involved and good, respectful partners. We heard of, well, Carol Hargate is not here, is she? We heard of a couple heroes. Carol Hargate from the nursing department worked in a number of organizations, churches, and model cities, and she was like the person who said, "Oh, everybody ought to be like Carol." She's highly involved, respectful partners. But more commonly, however, community members argued that faculty had little contact with the neighborhood after the students were placed. Most galling to community residents was the fact that many faculty do not do any type of follow-up with the neighborhood after a class ends. No reports, papers, or statements of gratitude. One person said, quote, "I never had any faculty ask how things were going. There was maybe one or two faculty members who would follow up in the sense of coming to work with organizations the next term. But there's never any follow-up with faculty where we discussed how things went. With most faculty, when it was done, it was done." Now, as someone who's done a lot of service learning courses in these neighborhoods and other neighborhoods in the cities, it struck home because I saw myself in that in many circumstances where things just slid. So we got to do better. If we look at the institution, Bethel as an institution suffered from a general lack of awareness of Bethel University and how it works. When Bethel makes decisions that affect the neighborhoods, the community often feels they're ignored and left out of the conversations. For example, when the Child Development Center was closed, many persons that we interviewed said they were surprised by the decision and wished they'd had the chance to provide some input into the decision. Now, from Bethel's perspective, the decision was a rational response to dropping enrollment, and it was forced by budgetary constraints. The community members were more concerned about, and the community members understood this when they heard that, but they're more concerned about the decision-making process than the end result. There's a number of other cases we can talk about that was similar. Well, given the stereotypes are really uncomfortable, and the dis-ease concerning how decisions are made, why then has Bethel been accepted by the community? It's the only school that has, the only university and college that has been accepted into a partnership. And two factors stand out. A lot of colleges, universities are heavily involved in the neighborhood, but it's somewhat unique. Well, first of all, what we heard is that Bethel University is respected as an educational institution, and community members stated that they hoped that community residents would have access to the educational benefits that Bethel could offer the neighborhoods. And this has been realized with the CAPS, the Center for Adult and Professional Studies, scholarships that Rita talked about. There was a CAPS cohort that ran in the neighborhood for a few years, and the Act 6 program, which has enrolled students from the neighborhood at Bethel. So this has been realized, and also by the many hours of tutoring offered to both children and adults in the neighborhood. Many people that we interviewed expressed an expansion, a desire for an expansion of these offerings, such as certificate programs and various types of programs that Bethel could offer in the neighborhood. A second reason why Bethel's been accepted, and we heard this from a number of people, is that Bethel is a faith-based organization. This clearly is the reason why it was invited into the partnership in 1998, when we look back at what was said and how Bethel was invited to the partnership by community residents. It continues to be an important factor. As one person said, quote, "I could just guess that Bethel being a college having a spiritual base was intriguing to me, because you can't really be successful in a neighborhood without a touch of spirituality being involved with it." So faith-based is really important. Well, what are some of the challenges, the systemic challenges? First of all, universities and communities are very different places. Okay. Bethel, being inside Bethel, it doesn't look quite as neat as being outside Bethel. But Bethel appears to be a highly organized, efficient entity with a single voice, and it's just one thing. Communities are messy, complicated, and always changing. How many organizations are there in Frogtown-Summit University? Maybe 100, if you consider the formal organizations and the informal ones. And do they all talk to each other and have the same goals? Not really, So communities are by their very nature messy and complicated. So they're different social institutions, and they sometimes speak different languages. So that's one systemic challenge. Another is the calendar. We love our calendar. We have endless discussions about calendars at Bethel. If you're in committees, and is that right, Deans? Communities don't operate on calendars, on the academic calendar anyway. So quite often a service learning class will just be starting to hit its stride from the community's viewpoint, and then it's over. So that the calendar really is a challenge. And we do things like spring break and Christmas break and things like that. So that is one systemic challenge that can be quite complicated. Another challenge is how we think about experts. Community members raise the issue of respect and compensation for community experts. As one person asked, well, what makes a person coming from an academic background so much more important than someone who comes in and tells their story? We tend to put great value on academic thoughts and titles. We'll pay more to an expert who has a degree. but we won't pay for an expert who actually lives it out. So that's a real challenge, and that should be acknowledged. One interview, he argued that Bethel students were coming into the neighborhood, hearing a rich story, obtaining a degree out of this, while the community member received little in return. The challenge of compensation and acknowledgement are very real. A last area, the last systemic challenge is decision making. A significant challenge for the community's ability to trust Bethel has been a number of decisions in which they felt like they were out of the loop. From Bethel's viewpoint, there has been clear communication. From the community's viewpoint, this has not happened. There's clear recognition of the limited power of the community to be involved in decision making. For example, one person said, PAC, the Partnership Advisory Committee, never had any kind of power or ability to make decisions. PAC was to give really good advice, but it was clear that the decisions would be made at Bethel. I don't think PAC has ever had decision-making power outside of deciding where students go for service learning. Unquote. So, a point of frustration and a systemic challenge is decision-making. How can the community be involved in that? How can it be heard? A point of frustration for many was the lack of access to decision makers at Bethel University. The two highlights that came up over and over again were the two retreats that Bethel had where senior administrators attended, including, I think in both cases, the president of the university came. And they look back at that as like key times in defining the partnership. And community members stated that they wish more of that would happen. Okay. Again, these are the perceptions of the community. Well, what are the benefits and the costs? For the community, there's tangible benefits. The many hours of volunteer work can be quite, help organizations. Applied research projects. One project I was involved in was looking at systemic racism in institutions in the Frogtown area. Scholarships are all tangible benefits that the community has enjoyed. But there's also intangible benefits too that were talked about. One person said, by being involved in PAC, I found out that there's all these other organizations in the neighborhood, and I've been able to hear what they're doing and to learn more about what they're doing and to find common ground. In other words, there's increased social capital that has occurred. There's some value, maybe even prestige in some people's minds with being connected to an institution of higher learning. The flip side of that is in some people's minds being connected with an institution of higher learning like Bethel might be a negative too, so there's some cost for community residents. For Bethel University, the benefits are pretty clear. It helps us be real. It helps us live out our faith commitment to be involved in the neighborhood. And we often talk about the Bethel bubble, which I think doesn't really exist, but we talk about it, and sometimes thinking that it exists hampers our ability to be involved at a wider scale. Well, we've been able to do that through the partnership. There have also been research and practice opportunities that many faculty members and students have been involved in. Okay? And then last of all, student learning, of course, has been really rich. So, what's the bottom line? Well, the bottom line is trust, the key to success. Community members argue that neighborhoods were leery, nervous about working with colleges because they've had a lot of interaction with colleges and universities over time. And, we're not always good partners. They felt that quite often they're not offered partnership in their experiences with colleges and universities, but were often treated more like a laboratory, a petri dish, or an ethics zoo. And so there is nervousness. But there is trust that has been built. It's always tenuous. Trust is always built. It's never established, right? And it's based upon relationships. Community members have valued those faculty who have been involved over a long period of time and who have been deliberate in fostering good relationships and being closely involved. I could list a number of them, but I won't. But a real key, and this is unique to Bethel, and I'll finish with this, is a partnership coordinator. Hannah Brecky is the partnership coordinator. His office is in the neighborhood. There's been 6 coordinators over time in the history of the partnership. The office has been in the neighborhood. They've been there to hear the community, to communicate with Bethel about the needs of the community and vice versa. Bethel's unique in having this position and partnership is a real key to success. Now Rita will clean up here.
As we wrap up our presentation, I wanted again to highlight the importance of mutual reciprocity in the partnership. This is a main emphasis that is in the mission statement of the partnership, and it's something that's constantly strived to do better. One way that Bethel could be better serving the community is by plugging in and using the resources that we have. It's continuing involvement as well as getting others involved in the work. I wanted to share some recommendations that we heard from the community members during our interviews. One main one that we heard was creating like a 20-year celebration of the partnership and incorporating into that a reunion aspect in which people who have been involved in the past could come and just see what the partnership is doing now and how it's developed so far. Another recommendation we heard was having Bethel students work with individuals in the community to help them receive their GEDs and then continue to connect in a cohort to get higher education through Bethel. I also wanted to give a little spiritual reflection of the work in the research that I've been doing. I think a lot of students at Bethel are constantly learning and struggling with how their faith can combine with the work they are going to do in the future. And I've had the privilege of meeting so many people who are actively living out how Jesus lived in their various roles. Pastors, community advocates who are fighting for justice and are making their voices heard as well as their community's voices heard. Nonprofit workers who are encouraging and coming alongside the poor and the needy, and so many other people in different vocations. I asked myself what the partnership means to me as a Christian, and through my reflection time in my meditating about the truths of Christian living, I came to one conclusion, that it's one way that Bethel could love our neighbors. In our various ways of interacting with community members, we aren't going there to evangelize, but that first and foremost, we should be pouring out our love on the community. Many of our respondents talked about the urban culture of the community and how Bethel isn't always understanding when it comes to issues of racism. It was an honor for me to listen to people's stories around these issues and to hear their concerns about the partnership pertaining to the issues. In 1 Corinthians 12:27, Jesus said, "Now you are the body of Christ, and each of you is a part of it." I wanted to share a question that I've been constantly asking myself, and that is, how can we be one body if we aren't acquainted with the other parts and we don't know them?
Come on.
Thank you. Okay, and we wanted to leave time for questions. I don't know what time it is, but I hope we have some.
Right. We have a little over 5 minutes here.
Oh, gotcha.
Practical question. I mean, I think that the dynamic you touch on with people feeling excluded from decision making is, I mean, it's kind of a predictable problem. It's kind of relationships where you have one side who has more of the financial resources and things like that, and it makes sense.
Right.
What, if anything, do you think could be changed in sort of the structural setup to make that better and to make them, to really incorporate them into the decision making more, but to also help them to feel incorporated into the decision making?
It's really a great question. I don't think community members were saying they should have made the decision about closing the CDC, or there was great concern about the budget cuts we had 4 years ago, how it was going to affect the community and stuff like that. What they're saying is that they felt like they didn't know what was happening, and that they were, like, for example, many of them, the closing the CDC was a long process on campus, and had some real, Andy could tell you, but Sean could tell you that there was quite a bit of deliberation. But it didn't look that way to the community, because most of them didn't hear anything about it until they heard, sometimes by word of mouth, that it was closed. Yeah, so I don't think community members are asking for decision making as much as being involved in the consultation, being asked what their opinion is. With the CDC, some people said, well, we would have really liked to been part of maybe a solution, trying to recruit more, more kids with the CDC or things like that. It might not have worked, but at least they would have liked to have tried. So it's communication. It's just a challenge, I think. And from Bethel's side, I know, talking to Sean, he felt that they had communicated. So it's not enough it's just to make sure that both sides are in agreement that, things have been communicated well.
And I just love that, both of you, and I'm so proud of you, Rita. Valuing the expertise, the lived expertise and the lived faith experiences that these knowledge bearers, these wisdom bearers and practitioners bring to the table.
Right.
Academia is very hierarchical,
Yeah.
and really devalues this rich resource. We have much to learn from these community members, and it makes my heart sing when I hear a reconciliation that is major, just saying, and sociology major, speak with such truth and such conviction. I just love it. But this is not hypothetical. So many people don't feel seen, heard, and valued for what they bring in their sheer humanity to the table. So systems are made by people.
Yeah.
They're not. So we need to really, how do we be relational?
Right. What you talking about, Melvin, Sandy, and their importance on the team?
Yeah, it was really important to have them just because they came from the community, and if it was just two Bethel people coming and doing research, it just wouldn't have worked.
Right.
And having two community members come and really give us advice and help us to analyze the data and what does this really mean is what they helped us answer was really important.
They also, when we would try to set up interviews, we're name droppers, the two of us. When we'd say that, what Melvin said you should call, we should call you.
That's right.
Or Sandy said we should call you. Or I talked to Ruth and she said we should. The credibility factor is just huge when you work in communities.
That's part of the trust.
Trust, exactly.
Calling people by name. Very important.
Just one more question. I think it's tied to Andrew's question about systemic challenges. What do you think, what suggestions do you have about the calendar? What could be done to address that? Because most of our classes run for a semester. And I think some of the programs that were most successful in the neighborhood of NHS should run for a whole academic year. So what are some things you think could be done?
Should I start on that? Okay. Yeah, I think nursing has a good model, for example. They have their students have a 2.5-year commitment to a single organization in Frogtown. Not many of us can do that. That's a unique program. But I think we're trying that a little bit in our department where students from qualitative last spring were working in Frogtown. Now students from quantitative this fall are following up with that and trying to continue the project. I think on a departmental level we can link courses. That would, you might not have the same students, but you'd have the same emphasis.
Yeah.
So thinking You know, as faculty members, we're myopic. You know, we think about our one course at a time usually. And we, you know, we're usually behind the eight ball on those. But if we would think at a departmental level or even between departments and think about continuing a project, you know, past one semester, that'd be quite helpful.
Yeah.
What do you think, Ruth? Do you think that would work out? Or Ruth
Yeah.
is at the Hub Center. And
Yeah, and you know, another thing is if, for example, if someone starts with the program volunteering for one semester and
Right.
then that's kind of the trial run for both
Mhm.
the community and the
Right,
Bethel.
right.
Sometimes, you know, maybe it could work into a work study, off-campus work study
That's right.
opportunity or something,
Yeah,
or
yeah.
someone who's tried and true and, you know,
Yeah, yeah.
it's a good fit.
Yeah.
I'm not.
Or internships.
But, or internship,
Internships.
or,
Right,
you know,
right.
additional
Right.
something, but.
Yeah, at the very least, having a conversation with people in the community about what would work best, and then, you know, try to solve that issue.
That is true, once you put that time into training someone
Right.
and getting them started, it's nice
Yeah.
to keep that.
And then they disappear. Yeah.
Yeah.
Other questions, comments? Yeah.
Just a quick follow-up on that. I mean, I think that makes sense, and I think if you even thought about, I'm just going to brainstorm here, but you know, if you thought about like students who are involved in a class, say, right, and next semester maybe their class is not going there, but you get the internship credit, right?
Right,
And so
right,
they can kind
right.
of continue that, and you can even kind of pitch that to them. I know
Yeah.
your sociology major, for example, you require an internship now, right?
Right,
So,
right.
I mean, that could be a nice way for them to fulfill it. You kind of keep
Yeah.
that ongoing relationship.
Yeah.
Then we're talking about something that's closer to a year instead of
Right.
just a semester.
And a
that's
much,
really
much
good.
richer experience for the
Yeah.
student, and
Yeah.
better
And
for the community. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
Great idea. Okay. We have time for one more question.
Well, I
think-
just wanted to share an anecdotal thing. So you're talking about how the, you know, the whole trust thing, and being part of PAC. I've worked with Bethel students for many, many years, for about like 20 years, close to 20 years, whatever. But just recently, I became a member of the PAC, the advisory committee, and so I go to those meetings, you know, monthly. And recently, one of the other organizations contacted us to ask if they could come and do a program at our location. And I was talking with some teachers about it, and you know, it takes time to plan and organize and you know all of that. And it was the beginning of the school year, it was really busy, and one of the teachers said, "Well, you don't have to take, you know, ownership of this. You can just say no." And I'm like, actually, no, I can't, because it's somebody that I'm going to see at a meeting next week, and like I like have a relationship with them.
There you go.
Right.
There you
So
go.
it's just like,
Mhm.
you know, that building trust is so
That's right.
important.
Yeah,
That's
yeah,
right.
that's a really great
And then, of
example.
course, it turned out to be a great thing that they did, and we were very happy, but it was just that, you know, that kind of like, oh, do I have time to do this? You know.
Yeah.
That's great. Thanks, Ruth.
Yeah.
Well, I think that we're out of time. Thanks for coming.
Wow, it's great.